Most heroes celebrate after defeating a demon lord, but our protagonist, Masura, is different. After helping defeat the demon lord, he shocks everyone by asking for an unusual reward. 4 warriors stand before the great sage, who offers to create anything they desire. Chris asks for a legendary bow, Reko requests a powerful staff, and Aron chooses a famous sword. Then Masura steps forward and asks for a love doll, a type of human-shaped golem often created by mages. While most are simple and common magical creations, his unexpected request leaves everyone stunned. Yet Masura does not want one from an ordinary mage. He wants one personally crafted by the great sage herself, in front of everyone. The consequences arrive immediately. He is removed from the party, banished from the holy capital, and stripped of whatever reputation he once had. Before long, he finds himself living in a small, forgettable town far away from the life he used to know, surviving on whatever low-ranked guild requests come his way. Still, the locals are beginning to realize he is far from useless. While visiting the guild, he delivers a large batch of detoxifying herbs requested by one of the receptionists. She is impressed by the amount and quickly approves the delivery before counting out his payment. As he glances at the coins, he notices a bandage wrapped around her forearm and casually asks about it. She replies that a monster injured her recently. He offers to heal it, and Rose-san agrees. A moment later, he calmly tells her it is finished. Confused, she removes the bandage and freezes. The wound is completely gone. No chant, no glowing magic circle, and not even physical contact. It simply disappears. Shocked, she demands an explanation. Masura casually tells her that minor injuries heal instantly when he treats them. Naturally, she assumes he must be one of the elite healing specialists from the sanctuary. In response, he lets out a dry laugh and admits that healing is the only thing he is good at. Beyond that, he has absolutely nothing to offer. With that, he says his farewells and heads home. The house waiting for him is modest and quiet, but it is not empty. A young woman greets him the moment he walks through the door, and he casually calls back that he is home. It is a surprisingly ordinary exchange for a man whose life has become anything but ordinary. 1 week after Masura arrived in this town, a package showed up on his doorstep. The sender was Isfortia, the great sage herself. Inside was Lavora, the greatest magical doll ever constructed, assembled by the most skilled magical hands in existence, delivered as a genuine fulfillment of a reward most people assumed had been voided the moment he got exiled. Masura had his reasons for making that request. The dolls made by ordinary mages were garbage, structurally weak, emotionally hollow, and they disintegrated the moment any real force was applied. He also had a theory that something crafted by a woman as extraordinary as the great sage would carry a completely different kind of presence, something that mass-produced versions could never replicate. His theory turned out to be correct in ways he was not prepared for. Lavora is perfect. That is the problem. Every time Masura looks at her, he does not feel excitement, he feels completely unworthy. The house is too small for her. His rank is too low. The entire situation of someone like him owning someone like her strikes him as deeply wrong. He stares at the floor instead of at her. Lavora watches this for a while before kneeling down to meet his eye level. She reminds him plainly that she is a golem and his servant. There is nothing to be nervous about. He acknowledges that intellectually, it changes nothing emotionally. She pushes further, asking why he even made the request in the first place if he was just going to freeze up. He explains himself honestly. The construction quality of standard dolls was insulting. They felt like touching a department store mannequin, and their poor craftsmanship ruined the experience immediately. He wanted something built properly, something that would actually last, and something made by the great sage carried a certain weight that no one else's work could match. Lavora listens to all of this, then asks flatly whether she at least means something to him now. He admits she does. She even resembles the great sage slightly, which does not help with the guilt. She is so flawless in every direction that instead of breaking through his hesitation, her perfection amplifies it. He shakes his head and spirals further, questioning whether this house is fit for her, whether a low-rank adventurer has any right to call himself her owner at all. Lavora looks at him steadily and tells him he is a coward. He laughs and says she is right. Then her expression shifts. She tells him quietly that the same thing making him a coward is also what she might genuinely like about him. The room goes completely still. Before Masura can process what she just said, she steps closer and quietly speaks to him. She is not going anywhere. However long it takes, she will be waiting right here. Something breaks open in him. He gets to his feet. He tells himself to stop calculating and stop second-guessing. He crosses the room, reaches out, and touches her shoulder. Then the apologies come pouring out of him before his hand even leaves her. Lavora tilts her head at a sound neither of them made. She looks toward the window. The town alarm is going off. Outside, the streets have become chaotic. A dragon, massive, violent, and completely uninterested in anything the guild fighters are managing to throw at it, is tearing through the city. Citizens are scrambling for shelter. Guild members are holding the line but running out of room to hold. Masura moves toward the window with every intention of going out there and contributing whatever minor support he can. Lavrora steps in front of him and shuts the window. She tells him calmly that she can end this herself. He stares at her. She reaches out and takes his hand, asking him to stay exactly where he is for just a little longer. Then she explains what she actually is beneath the surface. Not simply a golem, but a precision-engineered magical system. She absorbs vitality, emotional energy, spiritual force, and other forms of energy, converting everything directly into stored magical power. When Masura touched her shoulder minutes ago, the volume of energy that transferred into her was staggering, far beyond anything that casual physical contact should have been able to produce. She meets his eyes and suggests two possibilities. Either her construction is that exceptional, or his internal reserves run that deep. She pauses, then decides it is probably both. As she finishes speaking, her form begins to visibly expand. The power she has been storing is pressing outward now, looking for release. At the front lines, the guild's strongest fighters are grinding their teeth and running out of options. The senior member makes the call. Fall back, save who you can, survival comes first. The dragon turns its full attention on her. She braces. Then something erupts from behind the rooftops and tears across the sky in a single blinding streak. Lavrora releases everything she gathered in one clean, devastating burst. The dragon is gone. The field falls silent so suddenly it feels wrong. The guild celebrates that night the way people do when they narrowly escape something that had no reason to spare them. Every single person made it out. Masura had spent the aftermath quietly moving through the injured, closing wounds before anyone even thought to ask. When the senior guild member finds him tucked into a corner, she nearly knocks him off his seat with the force of her gratitude. He deflects all of it. He just wanted to give something back to a place that took him in without demanding explanations about why he left the last one. She pulls back and notes that it was Lavrora who actually finished the fight. She had no idea someone that capable had been living in his house this whole time. Lavrora sets her cup down and makes an announcement. She intends to fight alongside Masura from now on. She has made her decision. Then she turns to look at him directly and adds one condition. Someday, when the guilt finally stops eating him alive, she wants him to stop doubting himself and fully trust her. His face turns completely red. He stands up and declares he is going to reach S rank. Lavrora leans over and murmurs that cutting a small corner here and there would be perfectly acceptable. He catches himself and revises immediately. A rank. He meant day rank. That is his goal. He is absolutely certain of it. The morning after the celebration, light creeps through the window and Masura wakes up unable to move. His body is completely locked, eyes refusing to open. He reasons that keeping them shut only makes the dread worse, but the alternative feels equally terrifying. He throws the blanket off, forces his eyes open, and finds Lavrora lying right beside him watching him with a perfectly calm expression. He decides this is somehow more alarming than a ghost. He survives the experience and makes it to the table. He asks her flatly why she was in his bed when she has her own room. She pours his tea and explains she wanted to begin recharging her magical reserves and decided to start that morning. He says she could have simply mentioned that beforehand. She pouts and points out that warning him in advance would have guaranteed he spent the entire night too wound up to sleep. He opens his mouth to argue, clenches his fist, and closes it again. She is completely correct and he resents it. She lays out breakfast, a generous spread of bread and croissants that genuinely catches him off guard. He thanks her warmly. She admits she got carried away with excitement over their first guild outing together. He picks up a croissant feeling good about it. Then she asks him to hold on for the finishing touch. Before he can ask what that means, she leans forward and spreads a liquid across the table in one motion. He stares at the wreckage of what had been a beautiful breakfast. She corrects him before he can speak. It is not saliva, it is magical lotion. Applied to skin it keeps everything smooth indefinitely. In more practical situations it enhances magical conduction and bodily sensitivity. Consumed directly it releases a refined sweetness alongside significant nutritional enhancement. He stares at the food, picks it up reluctantly, takes a bite, and immediately understands it is extraordinary. He works through the entire spread in silence. When the plates are cleared he thanks her and means it. Then a warmth builds in his mouth and spreads into heat. He asks whether the sensitivity effect applies beyond skin. She confirms it does. He asks why she did not mention that before he ate everything. She tells him the effect fades in about 3 hours. He resolves quietly to avoid putting anything near his mouth until then. He pushes back from the table and announces it is time to head to the guild. She grabs his arm and pulls him back down. He has not brushed his teeth. What follows is less brushing and more an act of aggression involving a toothbrush. He emerges from it with watering eyes. She mentions conversationally that she likely has further undiscovered functions. Then she heads toward the door. The moment they step outside, the street erupts into noise. A man sprints past clutching someone else's money. The victim shouts after him. The thief calls back over his shoulder that he plans to enjoy himself with the earnings. Masura watches for half a second and shouts at him to stop. Lavroura asks if they are not supposed to be heading to the guild. He says the thief comes first and takes the stairs in one jump. They give chase. Masura notes the guy moves fast for someone robbing in broad daylight. Lavroura offers to blast him with magic. Masura waves it off as excessive. She points out that without something drastic he is going to get away clean. Before Masura can respond, the ground slopes sharply downhill and something clicks in his head. He turns to Lavroura and asks her to coat the slope with as much magical lubricant as possible. She looks skeptical, but obliges. Masura steps onto it, shoots down the incline, and slams directly into the thief from behind. The thief demands to know who just did that. Then the victim catches up and stops. He grabs the thief off the ground by the collar and calls him his son. Masura's jaw drops. The father informs his son he has been watching him carry on all day. The son dissolves into tears asking for mercy. Masura steps back and decides this has resolved itself. Lavroura appears beside him and asks if they can proceed to the guild now. He confirms they are going right now. Then his entire body lights up, the heat spreads outward in every direction at once. Lavroura takes one look at him, grabs his arm, and announces they are going home first to take a bath. He shouts for her to let him go. The scene shifts to a forest, though it does not match the urgency of the request. Masura stands with the map open, reading it again as if a second look might clarify things. They came all the way out here to eliminate whatever has been terrorizing the surrounding villages. He looks up. Their target is lounging in a chair, eyes closed, soaking in the afternoon sun without a care in the world. Masura and Lavroura exchanges looks. Before he can suggest they observe a little longer, she is already walking over. The woman opens one eye when Lavroura approaches. She asks with lazy amusement whether this is private property or something. Lavroura tells her that is not the point and asks directly, is she the one draining the nearby villagers? The woman's composure cracks just slightly. She corrects the framing immediately. She is not attacking anyone. She is simply taking a little energy. Lavroura identifies her without hesitation. A succubus. The woman does not deny it. Lavroura points out that humans drained of their vitality may walk away without visible wounds, but the exhaustion that follows is no small thing. The succubus bows her head and apologizes with surprising sincerity. Masura watches from a short distance and sighs. This feels less like a monster confrontation and more like catching someone jaywalking. He steps forward and asks what she is doing out in the middle of a forest in the first place. She explains that she escaped from somewhere she was essentially worked to the bone and has been living quietly on her own terms ever since. He tells her he understands, but there is a bounty on her head. Her expression collapses. She asks if that means extermination. He confirms it does. Something shifts in her face then, not panic but resignation hardening into resolve. She had kept her feeding restrained, taking the bare minimum from each person, careful never to push too far. If that still earns her a death sentence, she decides she has no reason to hold back anymore. The fight breaks out fast. She moves with the kind of speed that comes from genuine combat experience. Not a creature that stumbled into power, but a former high-ranking officer of the Demon Lord's army shaking off months of rust. She recognizes almost immediately that eliminating Masura first is the smarter play. A healer keeping his partner operational is a problem she cannot afford to ignore. She launches toward him from above. Lavroura intercepts her before she lands. The succubus recalibrates quickly, pivoting toward Lavroura instead, and then something unexpected happens. She goes for Lavroura directly, assuming a golem carries no real energy worth taking. She is wrong. The moment contact happens she feels it pulling the other direction. Lavroura is absorbing from her. The succubus pulls back, genuinely rattled. A golem should not be capable of this. Whatever this thing is, it operates on principles she has never encountered before. She steadies herself and meets Lavroura's eyes. If this is going to be a contest of who drains who first, she is not about to back down from that. What follows is not a clean exchange of spells. It is two creatures built around the same fundamental ability, trying to devour each other simultaneously, and the shockwave rolling off their clash nearly knocks Masura off his feet. He steadies himself and watches, genuinely stunned. The succubus cannot believe what is happening. Draining vitality through direct contact is not just something she can do, it is the thing she was built for, the crown jewel of everything the Demon Lord's army trained into her. And she is losing. Steadily, unmistakably, embarrassingly losing. She pulls back and switches approaches, driving her energy from a different angle, trying to catch Lavroura off guard. Masura shouts a warning. It barely matters, the shift in tactics only slows things down without changing the outcome. Something in the succubus refuses to accept this. She does not care about pride or reputation or the legacy of whatever army she used to serve. But losing at this, at her natural draining ability, the one thing that belongs entirely to her, to someone who wandered onto her territory and challenged her on her own terms, that she cannot walk away from. She launches into the air and comes down with everything she has left, slamming into Lavrora with the full weight of her desperation behind it. For a moment it looks like it might actually work. Then Lavrora looks back at her. The succubus hits the ground. Lavrora leans down, licks her cheek, and thanks her for the meal. When the succubus opens her eyes again, Masura is crouched nearby asking if she is alright. She sits up slowly, looks between the two of them, and asks why she is still breathing. Masura tells her plainly she does not read like something that deserves to be put down. Lavrora tilts her head and asks whether the real reason is simply that he found her too endearing to finish the job. He hesitates for exactly 1 second before admitting she is completely right. After watching everything that just happened, how could he see her any other way? He makes a decision on the spot. She just wants to live in peace, fine. If she ever runs low on energy, she should come find him. He will cover it. She stares at him like he has lost his mind, asking why he would go that far for someone who just tried to drain him dry and lost. He tells her it is simply his call to make, and he will own whatever comes from it. In exchange, she stops feeding on the villagers entirely. She has no real argument left. She agrees. She watches them leave with her vitality completely restored and her head full of questions she cannot answer. He gave back everything the fight cost her without hesitation, took responsibility for her without being asked, and somehow she still wants to close the distance between them even though she is running at full capacity. She touches her own face and notices the warmth there. The walk back is quieter. Lavrora points out that the extermination request is technically a failure. Masura sighs and starts to apologize. She cuts him off and tells him not to worry, they will do better next time. For now they should go home and rest. Masura agrees, feeling the drain of the day settling into his bones. He opens the front door and finds the succubus in his kitchen, already cooking, welcoming him home like she lives there. Lavrora removes her from the premises immediately. The succubus lands outside looking genuinely baffled, asking whether it would simply be more convenient for everyone if she stayed close. Masura hesitates. Logically she has a point, keeping her nearby means keeping her away from the villages entirely. He asks Lavrora what she thinks. She looks at him and tells him to stop filtering himself and just be honest about what he wants. Then she opens the door. The succubus steps back inside laughing, telling Masura there is no way his girlfriend is actually this understanding. She thanks them both. Then she turns to Masura and mentions she burned through a fair amount of energy getting here. Could she trouble him for a little energy? Before he can respond, Lavrora cuts in with a slight flush across her face. She also expended considerable power in that battle and would appreciate a recovery boost as well. Masura's eyes go wide. He tells them both absolutely not simultaneously. He is already running on empty. Neither of them listens. They descend on him from both sides at once. For Mero, waking up felt disorienting in the best possible way. Years spent as a high-ranking officer in the lustful demon lord's army had stripped mornings of any comfort, just orders, obligations, and a life she never chose. Her eyes snap open, and she tears the blanket off in a panic, convinced she is late for something. Then the room settles around her. The window, the quiet, the absence of anyone barking commands. Right, she escaped. She ended up here. She pulls the blanket back over herself and goes right back to sleep. When she finally surfaces properly, breakfast is already on the table. A full spread, warm and generous and completely unexpected. Mero stares at it like someone who forgot this was something mornings could contain. She says as much out loud, genuinely moved. Masura holds his hands together and agrees entirely. A smoother version with less repetition. Lavrora tells them both they are being dramatic and to eat before it gets cold. They dig in with matching enthusiasm. The first bite hits Mero deep. Between mouthfuls, she declares that she finally understands what happiness tastes like. Masura warmly thanks Lavrora. She notes that she selected the ingredients with his nutritional needs specifically in mind, though the blend seems to suit the demon's palate just as well. She then remarks that, unfortunately, the lotion cannot be converted into magical energy. Mero looks up from her plate and points out that solid food is its own necessity regardless. Even demons get hungry outside of magic and vitality. Masura nods sympathetically, saying that sustaining a demon's constitution must be demanding. Lavrora gets an idea. She tells Mero that if breakfast alone is not quite enough, there is always the magical lotion as a supplement. Mero tilts her head. Lavrora immediately reconsiders out loud, suggesting she probably avoid it since her mouth would feel strange afterward. That description makes Mero more curious, not less. She opens her mouth to ask a follow-up question. Lavrora takes the opening literally and drenches her tongue with it. Mero recoils, sputtering, then goes completely still as the flavor registers. She announces it as extraordinary, tingling, and bizarre, then shouts that her mouth is on fire. Masura tells her now she understands. Mero recovers, looks at Lavrora with genuine admiration, and asks how a golem is even capable of something like that. She turns to Masura assuming he must have built her. Then she looks Lavora up and down and concludes he must have a preference for a more generous figure. Masura says Lavora was not made by him at all. Lavora's expression sharpens immediately. She asks if that means he has no preference for that either. He backpedals fast, clarifying he was not rejecting the concept. Miro smirks and sides with Lavora, announcing that bigger is objectively superior and she pities anyone who disagrees. He shouts that is not what he said at all. The argument escalates across the table with him caught directly in the middle until something in him snaps and he announces loudly that he appreciates everything, all of it, every variety without exception. Both women go quiet and stare at him. He stares back, genuinely believing he just resolved something. Miro sighs and says she still cannot figure out his type. Lavora gazes into the middle distance and remarks what a vast world it is. He demands to know what that means. After the dishes are done, Masura heads toward the door and lets Miro know that he and Lavora are heading to the guild. Depending on the request, they might be back late. Miro sends them off cheerfully and closes the door behind them. The quiet lands differently when she is the only one in it. She settles onto the sofa and takes stock. The Demon Lord's army is behind her. She has a roof, a bed, and a breakfast that makes her emotional. By any reasonable measure, she has everything she wants. And yet the room feels too still. She is embarrassed by how quickly loneliness arrives. She cannot exactly wander into town either, not looking like this. Her eyes drift to the stationery cup on the table, crammed with pens and scissors and miscellaneous odds and ends. She pulls the scissors out slowly. She eyes the small wings on her head. A trim might solve the problem entirely. She raises them with theatrical determination, quietly jealous that Lavora gets to walk around freely while she is stuck indoors. The door flies open. Masura shouts her name. She startles so hard the scissors launch out of her hand and clatter across the floor. Lavora looks at the scissors, then at Miro, and asks what exactly she was about to do. Miro laughs it off and says she expected them back much later. Masura reaches into the bag he is carrying and produces a hat, holding it out. He spotted it on the way to the guild and turned back. With the wings tucked underneath, she passed for a human well enough to walk around outside freely. Miro takes it and turns it over in her hands quietly. She had been sitting here feeling restless and useless and privately miserable. She likes her own company, she admits, but apparently not for more than 20 minutes. She puts the hat on and asks, even knowing how selfish it sounds, whether she can come along anyway. Masura laughs and says of course. Miro reaches for his hand. Lavora picks the scissors up off the floor, looks pointedly at Miro's tail, and suggests they could also just remove the problem entirely. Miro shrieks that she will tuck it into her clothes. The guild job wraps up smoothly, and Lavora tells Masura that at this rate he will make A rank in no time. He laughs and agrees. Then a voice calls out from near the gate. Masura spins around upon hearing a familiar voice. It is Riko, one of his former party members, standing there like the past, who decided to show up unannounced. Miro leans over and asks if he knows her. He confirms she is a friend from his holy capital days. Riko wastes no time, immediately clocking Lavora as a golem and stepping closer for a better look. Lavora does not appreciate being examined like an exhibit. Riko is impressed regardless, noting the great sage's craftsmanship is unmistakable. Masura asks nervously whether being seen with an exile is going to cause her trouble. Riko waves it off. She was just passing through and stopped by. The whole exile situation was mostly the great sage's attendants overreacting. The great sage herself is not particularly bothered. She grins and says she gets where he was coming from. Masura has absolutely no idea what she means by that, but nods anyway. She suggests they catch up properly. Just the two of them. They settle into a nearby cafe. Riko wraps both hands around her tea and admits things have been rough without him around. Nobody in the party comes close to his healing ability, and they cannot exactly pull the great sage out of the capital every time someone gets scratched. Masura sympathizes. She asks how he is doing. He launches into a straightforward update about his guild work and A-rank ambitions. She cuts him off and clarifies that is not what she is asking about. What she wants to know is whether he has used the golem the great sage made for him yet. Masura stands up so fast his chair scrapes the floor. Riko explains herself before he can react. Eliminating distractions temporarily reduces mental noise that can interfere with high-level magic. Even she reportedly takes measures to reduce distractions before a major monster hunt. Masura tells her loudly that they are in a public place. She continues unfazed. His healing magic is extraordinary even while burdened with normal emotional attachment. If that attachment were temporarily reduced, his output during that window might actually rival the great sage. That was the real reason he asked for Lavora, right? A controlled method to regulate his overwhelming vitality. A way to eventually take down future demon lords without collateral destruction. Masura stares at her. He had never once considered any of that, not even slightly. He straightens up and tells her she is exactly right. Riko lights up, squinting with the satisfaction of someone whose theory just got confirmed. She says if he had simply explained himself properly from the start, None of the exile business would have escalated the way it did. The party understands. The great sage understands. Masura smiles with his entire body trembling. Meanwhile, 2 tables away, Miro and Lavora are watching all of this in unconvincing disguises. Miro processes the explanation and admits she never noticed because Masura is such an anomaly. But with Lavora around, temporarily lowering his vitality would not be impossible. And she is here too theoretically. She turns to share this observation with Lavora. Lavora is gone. She is already at Masura's table, standing close. Both Masura and Riko stare at her. Lavora looks up at Masura and asks quietly whether she was only ever a means for him to get stronger. Before he can answer, she stands back up and adds that if that is the case, Miro is already here filling the same role. He could just line up a dozen cheap golems and call it efficient. She turns to leave. Masura grabs her hand and asks her to wait. She turns back and asks him why she should. He stands there looking at her. He looks at Reko, he looks back at Lavora, then he takes a breath and tells them both he lied. He was putting on airs because their misunderstanding was flattering and he let it run. The actual reason he asked the great sage for Lavora was purely because he wanted to be with her. That is it. No strategic calculation, no power scaling ambitions. He has been working toward A rank specifically so he can stop overthinking long enough to give her the kind of normal life she deserves. Defeating demon lords, losing his vitality, becoming some legendary mage, none of it has ever crossed his mind since she arrived. Not once. The cafe is very quiet. Lavora quickly kisses him on the cheek. The cafe owner shouts at them to take it outside. Masura apologizes, and they leave immediately. He says goodbye to Riko on the way out, asking her to clear up the misunderstanding with the others if she gets the chance. Riko stands alone at the table watching them go, trying to figure out what just happened to her in the afternoon. On the walk home, Lavora tells him he should have just been honest from the beginning. Miro, falling into step beside them, asks whether Lavora is only saying that because she was a little worried herself. She considers this for exactly 1 second and admits that is not entirely untrue. The next morning, the 3 of them stand in front of the quest board like reasonable adults preparing for a reasonable day. Then Miro spots something and tells Masura to look closer. He leans in. His eyes go wide. An A-rank quest. At this guild. He says this out loud with enough surprise in his voice that Rose, the receptionist, materializes beside him immediately to ask what exactly he means by a guild like this. He backpedals fast. He asks if he can take it. Rose thinks it over and admits that, given what Lavora did to that dragon, special permission is probably manageable. But the quest location is the problem. The giant monster has appeared in the holy capital. Masura's face falls off completely. He sinks to his knees right there on the guild floor. He was exiled. Walking back in there is not an adventure, it is a funeral. Lavora looks down at him from above and tells him it is fine as long as he is not recognized. Simple enough. What follows is not simple. The disguise Lavora selects involves a formal outfit, a very noticeable one. Masura wonders why changing his appearance is required for a city infiltration mission. Lavora explains that changing his appearance makes him harder to identify. This is technically logical. It does not make the outfit less noticeable. Before he can mount a proper objection, Miro arrives with additional outfit options and the 2 of them begin treating him like a collaborative project. He protests. They do not hear him. He protests louder. They are debating accessories. When the final look comes together, Miro steps back and admits this might actually be the best one. She finds it genuinely impressive that someone with his particular energy can pull off that look convincingly. Lavora announces it is time for the finishing touch and guides him outside before he can ask what that means. She tells him to hold still. She activates something she calls her reverse function and the smoke settles around him. Masura looks down at himself, noticing a complete physical transformation. Miro stares. Lavora explains cheerfully that reverse is one of her built-in capabilities, allowing her to physically alter appearances for disguise purposes. Miro's expression shifts into something that Masura does not like at all. She looks at him and says she may have no choice but to have another round with him. He shouts that he is absolutely not doing that. Lavora says it is not finished yet and snaps her fingers. Things escalate. Masura stares at his new proportions with the expression of a man whose brain has stopped processing information in an orderly way. Miro immediately files a formal objection. Making him that exaggerated is a gross misinterpretation of the assignment and she demands corrections downward. Masura is having some kind of private crisis in the background. Lavora responds that for disguise purposes, a more distinct silhouette is less recognizable. Miro argues that proportions like that will make him stand out for entirely the wrong reasons. Lavora fires back that just because Miro is personally modest she should not be projecting that onto Masura. Miro says the one doing the projecting is clearly Lavora. Everyone has an appropriate size and this is not it. The argument deteriorates rapidly. Masura slams his hand against the nearest wall and asks if they are genuinely about to fight over this. Both of them shout that they are absolutely not going to fight in the middle of town like last time. So they relocate to the football stadium. Miro announces they will settle the matter with basketball. Masura asks why basketball specifically. Nobody answers this question. Lavora explains the rules. Every point she scores increases Masura's disguise scale. Every point Miro scores decreases it. First to 5 points wins. Miro cracks her knuckles with the confidence of someone who has already mentally decided she will win. Masura shouts that he never consented to any of this and is still not comfortable with the situation to begin with. The ladies consider this feedback and ask whether as a compromise, they should simply adjust everything in one direction. He tells them that is not a compromise. He collapses. He tells them fine, just pick something reasonable and be done with it. They ask him to referee instead. He says he will do it, but admits he does not know much about basketball. They tell him not to worry and to just watch for obvious fouls. He feels sick. The remaining debate is over who goes first. After considerable deliberation, they agree that the jump ball decides it. Both women face off with the intensity of people who have completely lost perspective on what started this conversation. Masura watches from the sideline, wondering how an A-rank quest turned into this. Masura surveys the situation in front of him and arrives at a simple conclusion. He is being used as a scoreboard. A living, breathing, increasingly distressed scoreboard. Nobody asked him. The height difference settles the jump ball immediately in Lavrora's favor, and she wastes no time converting it into the first point. She looks at Miro and announces that the size goes up. Masura makes a noise. Miro scrambles back to her feet, furious, and transitions straight into offense. She gets past Lavrora's initial defense and is a step away from the basket when Lavrora materializes out of nowhere and swats the ball clean. Miro stares at her. Lavrora smiles and points out that it was a successful block, so it is her turn again. Miro hits the floor. Lavrora notes cheerfully that the height advantage is really paying off. Miro asks her what she means by it, as it seems like she has the advantage when she was clearly the one who suggested basketball in the first place, knowing full well she had that advantage. Lavrora says she is not sure what Miro means. Another point. Another size increase. Masura's clothes begin losing the structural integrity argument. He looks down at the situation developing in front of him, and his brain does something complicated. He cannot just let things tear apart in the middle of a football stadium. Someone has to manage this. He has no choice but to intervene physically. This is purely practical. He positions his hands carefully, reasoning that if Lavrora scores again and things expand further, the momentum would bring everything directly into contact with him. Technically, that means he is not initiating anything. The physics are doing it. He grinds his teeth and silently encourages Lavrora to keep scoring. Miro gets the ball and drives toward the basket. Lavrora moves to cut her off. Miro jinks sideways, goes up, and puts it through from distance. She lands and announces that was a three-pointer, so the size drops by 3. Lavrora calmly informs her that no matter what kind of shot it is, 1 point means 1 cup size. Miro processes this and decides she is fine with it. The game accelerates. Masura's dimensions fluctuate back and forth with each exchange, and he is standing at the sideline vibrating with an emotion he cannot name and refuses to examine. The score reaches 3-4 with Miro leading by 1. She grinds her teeth and announces she will score here and lock the result at what she considers a reasonable and dignified size. Just barely acceptable. Truly just barely. Lavrora grinds her teeth right back and says she absolutely will not allow him to be stuck with a half-baked result. Miro shouts that her preferred outcome is perfectly reasonable. Lavrora says she will stop her no matter how many times she tries. What follows is the most intense basketball either of them has ever played over stakes that have no business being this high. Miro drives, pulls back, fakes left, and realizes mid-air that the angle she has committed to is going to be called as traveling. She improvises. The ball goes in from an angle that defies reasonable description. She jumps in celebration. Lavrora exhales and concedes the point. Masura's situation resolves itself in Miro's preferred direction. Masura asks if that is how this ends. Lavrora considers the outcome and decides that fewer, in this case, means her own value increases comparatively. Miro says that for disguise purposes, this is probably sufficient and immediately moves to hug him, telling him he looks wonderful. Then she leans in and whispers that she noticed what he was trying to do with his hands that whole time. His face turns completely red. His face ignites. She adds that since he was too embarrassed to manage it himself, she had been thinking of helping him out directly. She moves closer to assist him in a very direct way. She begins doing exactly that. He shouts for her to stop immediately while panicking and flustered beyond words. They make it back to the guild significantly later than planned. Rose looks up from the counter and mentions that since they took so long, she went ahead and reassigned the Holy Capital quest to someone else. Masura stares at her. He says very quietly that he suffered enormously for that quest. In the Holy Capital's eastern residential district, a man desperately tries to escape. Breathing heavily, he grinds his teeth in frustration, wondering what is even going on. Suddenly, a woman smirks and tells him that running is useless before capturing him with countless chains. She proudly declares that her chains cover every corner of the holy capital and questions whether he is the degenerate artist responsible for drawing and selling obscene sketches. The order will not tolerate such things. She announces that all of his creations will be disposed of, and to fix his filthy nature, he will be forced into a special curriculum. The man immediately fights back, shielding himself as he throws a fireball and shouts that he is the one in the right. The woman glares at him and asks what he means by that. He argues that even adventurers highly value his drawings because satisfying their desires helps increase their magic power. She shouts that she will make him understand through magic whether he likes it or not. Their powers clash, but the man soon begins to lose ground. Emerging from the smoke, the woman tells him that desires suppressed through shortcuts only return again. True control comes from one's own will. She asks him to witness pure, 100% untainted magic before casting chain rain and slamming her chains into the ground. The man curses under his breath, only to be captured and suspended high in the air. She loudly declares that people like him are foolish beasts led around by their desires and that she will personally discipline them. To her surprise, the man chuckles and admits that maybe it is not so bad after all. The citizens watching nearby cheer happily. They praise Vice Captain Zetatea and thank her for dealing with the problem, complaining that the drawings were being sold openly even in crowded marketplaces. One citizen reveals that their own son had secretly hidden one of the artist's paintings. They beg her to keep the lewd artist locked up forever. Holding back tears, Zetatea says she will consider it. Just then, a knight approaches and informs her that an emergency debriefing session has been called. Confused, she learns that Riko has made contact with Masura and has been ordered to report everything that happened during the encounter. The moment she hears his name, her hands tremble. Even though she is Masura's childhood friend, she has barely seen him since his exile. Quickly regaining her composure, she announces that she is heading to the session immediately. Arriving at the Great Sage Cathedral, Zetatea listens as the situation is explained. Riko reports that Masura appears to have been used, while Lavrora brings up the golem created by the Great Sage. The Great Sage thanks them for the report. Meanwhile, Riko sighs in frustration, saying that after going through the trouble of secretly meeting Masura, she now feels like a complete snitch. Zetatea immediately shoots her an irritated look. One woman points out that ever since the Demon Lord of Pride was defeated, monsters have been targeting the holy capital more frequently. Another adds that Masura's movements should be monitored just in case. At that moment, Riko suddenly remembers a message from Masura. She repeats his words, explaining that he claims he never requested the love doll to defeat the Demon Lord. The room falls silent. Awkwardly, she adds that he only asked for it because of his urges. A woman smirks and asks if that is really true. The Great Sage chuckles and says that even if it is, the result remains unchanged. Suddenly, Zetatea slams her hands onto the table. Everyone believed Masura had received that specific golem because it was expected to help defeat the remaining demon lords. If that assumption is wrong, then his punishment may need to be reconsidered. If word spreads and exile remains the only punishment, the authority of both the Great Sage and the Holy Capital could suffer. While the others discuss the matter, Zetatea drifts off into her own thoughts. If it was really just simple lust, then Masura should have taken her with him. The thought catches her completely off guard. When someone asks for her opinion, she quickly agrees that a harsher punishment may be necessary. Then a sudden realization strikes her. If she is the one carrying out the punishment, she can legally see Masura again. Riko immediately asks what kind of punishment they are talking about. Without thinking, Zetatea jumps to her feet and loudly declares that Masura will be executed. The room goes silent. Even she realizes she may have gone too far. Riko instantly explodes, shouting that Masura is still a hero of the holy capital. Zetatea snaps back and tells her to shut up, calling her rotten to the core. Riko nearly loses her temper, but before things can escalate further, the Great Sage orders everyone to be quiet. After a brief silence, the Great Sage announces that Masura's punishment will be left entirely to Zetatea. The room is stunned, while Zetatea can barely hide her excitement. However, the Great Sage sets one condition. The deadline is tomorrow. After that, no further punishment will be allowed. When asked if anyone objects, nobody speaks. Zetatea realizes that this arrangement actually works in her favor. Riko sighs and accepts the decision, though she remains unconvinced. Besides, there is no way someone like Masura would actually get killed. Before long, news spreads across the holy capital that Vice Captain Zetatea is heading out to execute Masura. The rumor quickly becomes the talk of the town. Some point out that Masura's healing magic is absurdly powerful, so she must be heading there fully prepared. Others wonder whether she will wear the jet black armor she once used against a dragon. Another insists she will probably choose the pure white armor that terrified a demon lord. As the crowd continues debating, Zetatea finally steps outside. Everyone freezes. Instead of legendary armor, she is wearing a simple top and a pair of jeans. The crowd stares in disbelief before wishing her luck. Watching her leave, they slowly realize that she is not dressed for battle at all. She is simply wearing casual clothes.
Here I am, know it's been a while. I was in denial about my love. Here I stand, I know I walked away.